The cosmos has rewritten our story without our permission. From the first beep in the sky to the silent footsteps on another world, space exploration is not just about rockets and stars. It is the hidden author of modern history. This is a countdown of 30 space events that fundamentally changed everything, from the geopolitics of our planet to the science in our textbooks and the dreams in our collective mind. You will witness stories of breathtaking triumph, devastating tragedy, and the precise moments humanity redefined its place in the universe. What began as a single, anxious signal from orbit set off a chain reaction that reached your smartphone, your weather forecast, and your view of the future. How did a tiny metal sphere spark a global panic that reshaped nations? What did astronauts see from lunar orbit that made an entire generation look at Earth differently? By the end, you will understand how the void above us became the most powerful force shaping life below. What does our relentless drive to reach beyond Earth reveal about who we truly are? That first signal from the heavens was not a message of peace. On October 4, 1957, a polished metal sphere no larger than a beach ball was hurled into orbit by a converted Soviet intercontinental missile. It was called Sputnik 1, and its purpose was brutally simple: to prove it could be done. For 23 days, its steady, mechanical beep, beep, beep pulsed through radios worldwide, a chilling soundtrack to a new reality. This was not science fiction, it was science fact, and it was broadcasting from directly overhead. The technical achievement was staggering for its time: a 184-pound satellite with 4 long antennas, tracing an elliptical path around Earth every 96 minutes. But the raw data was utterly secondary to the psychological impact. That incessant beeping was a global alarm bell. If the Soviets could put a satellite in orbit, the grim logic followed: they could just as easily put a nuclear warhead on any city in the world. Overnight, the sky was no longer a neutral frontier. It was a new high ground, and America had lost it. The resulting panic in the West was dubbed the Sputnik crisis. Newspapers ran headlines of dread. Politicians spoke of a technological Pearl Harbor, and a deep anxiety settled over the public. The United States, the self-proclaimed leader of the free world, had been beaten, and beaten publicly, in the most visible arena imaginable. This singular event did not just start a race. It defined the terms of a new kind of warfare, one fought with engineers and physicists instead of just soldiers. The response was swift and total. Within a year, the United States would establish the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, centralizing its civilian space efforts. Congress passed the National Defense Education Act, pouring unprecedented funds into science and mathematics, aiming to produce a generation of engineers to close the gap. Military strategy was rewritten overnight, with a frantic push to develop rockets that could match and surpass Soviet lift capability. Sputnik's beep was the starting pistol, and the entire world began to run. The beeping of Sputnik was a challenge, but a human voice from orbit would be a declaration of victory. Just 3.5 years later, on April 12, 1961, that voice belonged to a 27-year-old Soviet pilot named Yuri Gagarin. Strapped into a spherical capsule called Vostok 1, he sat atop a modified ballistic missile, a vehicle so secret that even he was not shown the final rocket until the day of the launch. The mission was breathtakingly simple in concept and terrifyingly complex in execution: send a man into space, orbit the Earth once, and bring him home alive. No one knew for certain if a human body could withstand the violence of launch, the weightlessness of orbit, or the searing heat of re-entry. Gagarin was quite literally a biological experiment hurtling into the unknown. At 9:07 Moscow time, the engines ignited. As the rocket lifted from the pad, Gagarin radioed a single, exuberant word that would echo through history: Poyakali, let us go. For 108 minutes, Yuri Gagarin was the entire human species looking down. His capsule completed a single orbit, tracing a path over oceans and continents unseen by any person before him. He reported feeling wonderful, observing the curvature of the Earth and the deep blackness of space. He ate from toothpaste-like tubes, and famously noted that the planet had no borders visible from his vantage point. But the mission was fraught with hidden perils. The retro-rocket system, designed to slow the capsule for re-entry, fired for a few seconds longer than planned. The service module failed to detach cleanly, causing the capsule to tumble violently for 10 agonizing minutes before the connecting wires finally burned through. During re-entry, the G-forces climbed to a crushing 8 times Earth's gravity, pinning Gagarin to his seat. He ejected as planned from the capsule at an altitude of about 23,000 feet, parachuting safely to a field near the Volga River, where a stunned farmer and her daughter were the first to encounter this man in a bright orange suit who had just fallen from the sky. The Soviet Union announced the triumph only after Gagarin was safely on the ground, the secrecy absolute until success was guaranteed. When the news broke, it detonated a second global shockwave. This was not another beeping machine, this was a person. A smiling, courageous young man had ventured into the cosmic ocean and returned to tell the tale. Overnight, Yuri Gagarin became the most famous person on the planet, a symbol of communist achievement and human potential. For the United States, the sting was even deeper than Sputnik. They had been preparing their own astronaut, Alan Shepard, for a suborbital hop, a mere up-and-down flight. Gagarin's full orbit rendered that plan instantly obsolete, a second-place effort before it even left the ground. The goalposts of the space race moved irrevocably that day. It was no longer about which country could launch the best satellite. It was about which civilization would put humans on the moon. Gagarin proved we could survive the journey, but the destination had just gotten much, much farther away. America's answer to Gagarin required not just a flight, but a hero. For nearly a year after Yuri Gagarin's triumph, the United States watched as the Soviets launched another cosmonaut, then another, each mission growing longer and more complex. The American program, Mercury, had managed only brief suborbital hops. The pressure was immense, the need for a symbolic victory absolute. That weight fell on the shoulders of 40-year-old Marine pilot John Glenn. On February 20, 1962, he climbed into a capsule he had named Friendship 7. His mission was clear: orbit the Earth, match the Soviet feat, and do it with the whole world watching. The Atlas rocket, notoriously temperamental, roared to life without issue, pushing Glenn into a history-making orbit. For the first time, an American was weightless, looking down at the world from a speeding metal shell. He described the stunning view of a sunset from space, the layer of delicate luminescent particles he called fireflies, and the profound beauty of his home planet. But the real drama of the mission was not the view. It was a single, chilling warning light on the ground. About halfway through the third and final orbit, Mission Control in Cape Canaveral received a telemetry signal indicating that the capsule's landing bag had deployed. This was catastrophic. The landing bag was stored underneath the spacecraft's vital heat shield. If the bag was already out, it meant the heat shield was likely loose, held on only by the straps of the retro rocket pack. Without that shield, John Glenn and Friendship 7 would be incinerated in a fireball during re-entry. A tense, silent debate erupted on the ground. They could not tell Glenn the full, terrifying reason for their next command, fearing it might distract him or cause panic. Instead, they calmly instructed him to override the automatic procedure and keep the retro rocket pack attached after its firing was complete. The hope was that the pack's metal straps would help hold a potentially loose heat shield in place during the brutal re-entry. Glenn, the cool test pilot, complied without understanding the mortal peril. As Friendship 7 slammed back into the atmosphere, a giant orange plasma sheath engulfed the capsule. Glenn saw chunks of flaming debris, the retro pack burning away, flying past his window. For 4 minutes, he was a man riding a meteor, unsure if the next piece of burning debris would be his own heat shield failing. Only when the main parachutes deployed successfully did mission control, and the world exhale. The sensor had been faulty, the heat shield was secure all along, but that did not matter. John Glenn had faced a silent, hypothetical doom with flawless composure and returned a national icon. His 3 orbits restored American confidence, proving the Mercury spacecraft could be trusted. More importantly, it proved America had the right stuff to compete. The moon was now a tangible destination, not just a dream. The race was truly on, and for the first time, the United States felt it was in it to win. Yet the relentless push toward the moon carried a terrible price, one paid not in the vacuum of space, but on the launch pad. By 1966, the Apollo program was building formidable momentum. The goal set by President Kennedy seemed within reach, a lunar landing before the decade was out. The spacecraft designed for the journey was the sophisticated Apollo Command Module, a conical cabin built by North American Aviation. On January 27, 1967, the crew of Apollo 1, veterans Gus Grissom and Ed White, and rookie Roger Chaffee, were strapped into the module atop a Saturn 1B rocket at Cape Kennedy. This was not a launch, but a plugs-out test, a full-dress rehearsal with the spacecraft running on its own internal power while sealed atop the rocket. The atmosphere inside the cabin was pure oxygen at a pressure slightly higher than sea level, a design choice meant to simplify the life support system. For hours, the test was plagued by minor glitches and communications static. Then, at 6:31 in the evening, a voice crackled over the intercom. Fire in the cockpit. The transmission was from Roger Chaffee. On grainy black and white video monitors, a flash was seen inside the small window. Flames, fueled by the pure oxygen environment and fed by miles of flammable Velcro and nylon netting installed for convenience, erupted with terrifying speed. The crew's last sounds were shouts of movement as they tried to open the hatch. It was a hopeless task. The hatch was a complex, inward-opening design that required a minimum of 90 seconds to unlock under ideal conditions. In the inferno, with pressure spiking inside the capsule, it became an impassable wall. The ground crew fought desperately to reach them, but the intense heat and smoke drove them back repeatedly. By the time they finally opened the hatch, it was too late. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were gone. The investigation that followed was brutal in its honesty. The fire was traced to a single exposed wire under Grissom's seat that sparked. But the spark was not the cause, it was the trigger. The real causes were systemic: a dangerous pure oxygen atmosphere on the ground, the abundance of combustible materials inside the cabin, and that fatally flawed inward opening hatch that trapped the men inside. The disaster brought the entire Apollo program to a grinding, mournful halt for 20 months. In that time, the command module was completely redesigned from the inside out. The flammable materials were replaced with self-extinguishing fabrics. The pure oxygen atmosphere on the ground was abandoned for a safer nitrogen-oxygen mix. Most critically, the hatch was completely re-engineered, transformed into a unified hatch that could be blown outward by the crew in mere seconds with the pull of a handle. Beyond the hardware, the tragedy forced a profound cultural shift within NASA. The go fast, can-do attitude of the early race was tempered by a new, relentless focus on safety, quality control, and open communication, where engineers were empowered to voice concerns without fear. The Apollo 1 fire was a searing lesson written in sacrifice. The spacecraft that later flew to the moon, the missions of Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins, were not the same machines that failed on that pad. They were safer, smarter, and more reliable, their very existence a testament to the 3 astronauts whose loss made the ultimate journey possible. The sacrifice of Apollo 1 forged a safer path, but the ultimate goal remained shrouded in uncertainty. 1968, arrived as a year of profound turmoil on Earth, a planet fractured by war, political assassinations, and civil unrest. The dream of reaching the moon felt increasingly distant, a technical ambition disconnected from a world in chaos. Yet in that atmosphere of division, NASA made a decision of breathtaking audacity. With the lunar module behind schedule and intelligence suggesting a new Soviet moonshot was imminent, the agency pivoted. Apollo 8, originally planned as an Earth orbit test, would now go all the way. Its mission was to become the first human spacecraft to leave Earth's gravitational embrace, travel 250,000 miles, and orbit the moon. There would be no landing, no lunar module, just a solitary command module carrying 3 men, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders, into the deepest void humanity had ever attempted. The risks were monumental. The giant Saturn V rocket had only flown twice before, and never with a crew. The engine burn needed to enter lunar orbit, performed on the far side of the moon out of all contact with Earth, had to be perfect. A failure would strand them forever in space or send them crashing into the lunar surface. On December 21st, they launched. For 3 days, they coasted toward a gray world growing larger in their windows. On Christmas Eve, they fired the engine as planned behind the moon, disappearing into radio silence for the longest 33 minutes of many lives back on Earth. When their signal crackled back to life, they were in orbit, the first humans to see the far side of the moon with their own eyes. Then, during their 9th orbit, they pointed a makeshift television camera out the window. What they broadcast live to over 1 billion people across the globe was not the desolate lunar landscape below them, but a sight no human eyes had ever witnessed. As their spacecraft rotated, the blue and white marble of Earth rose into view over the barren, cratered horizon of the moon. Bill Anders captured the moment in a now iconic color photograph simply called Earthrise. Against the infinite black of space and the dead gray of the moon, our planet appeared as a fragile, luminous oasis of life, breathtakingly beautiful and utterly alone. In that moment, the mission's commander, Frank Borman, addressed the world. He said the crew had a message for all the people on Earth. Then, taking turns, Borman, Lovell, and Anders began to read from the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The choice of words was deliberate, a universal origin story meant to transcend national borders and political strife. As their voices echoed from lunar orbit, showing that stunning, lonely image of our shared home, the effect was transcendental. For a brief window on Christmas Eve, the Vietnam War paused, protests quieted, and a fractured species looked up together. The broadcast was not about American triumph, it was a human moment. That image of Earthrise, a delicate world without visible borders, became the most powerful environmental icon in history. It sparked the modern ecological movement, giving visual proof of our planet's vulnerability and unity. Apollo 8 did not land on the moon, but it accomplished something perhaps more vital. It gave humanity a new perspective, a cosmic mirror that reflected not who we were divided, but what we were together. A precious crew on a small ship in a vast and empty sea. The race to the moon suddenly felt less like a competition and more like a pilgrimage for all mankind. The profound unity felt during Apollo 8 now faced its ultimate test, a touchdown on that distant gray world. The summer of 1969 held a planet in collective suspense. All eyes turned toward the trio of astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, racing toward their date with destiny. The journey was tense but flawless, until the final, most dangerous phase. As the lunar module Eagle separated and began its powered descent, Armstrong and Aldrin were focused on a stream of computer data and the cratered landscape rushing up to meet them. Then a master alarm flashed. Program Alarm 1202, Aldrin called out, his voice calm but urgent. It was a code neither man recognized, a signal that the spacecraft's primitive computer was overloaded. In Houston, A young flight controller named Steve Bales had seconds to decide, abort or continue. He gave the go, recognizing the alarm was a nuisance, not a catastrophe. But the tension was just beginning. As Aldrin called out altitude and velocity data, Armstrong saw the computer's chosen landing site was a boulder-strewn crater. With fuel draining rapidly, he took manual control, flying the Eagle like a helicopter, skimming over the hazardous terrain, searching for a smooth spot. Mission control was silent, listening to the tense exchange. 60 seconds came the call from Houston, warning of low fuel. Then, 30 seconds. Armstrong's heart rate, normally in the 70s, soared to 150. Dust kicked up, obscuring the surface. Then, a blue light illuminated on the panel. Contact light, Aldrin said, as one of the landing probes touched the soil. 4 seconds later, Armstrong's voice, calm and clear, filled the airwaves. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." The relief in Charlie Duke's response from Mission Control was palpable. "You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue." "We're breathing again." For a moment, the two men just sat, the first humans to arrive at another world. Then came the ceremony the world was waiting for. Hours later, in his bulky, white spacesuit, Neil Armstrong backed out of the hatch and descended the ladder. A black and white camera attached to the Eagle's leg sent a ghostly, flickering image to over 600 million people watching on Earth. As he stepped onto the lunar dust, he spoke the words prepared and yet profoundly spontaneous. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The moment was both technically majestic and strangely mundane. A human being simply hopping off a ladder onto a new shore. Buzz Aldrin joined him shortly, describing the magnificent desolation. They planted an American flag, its staff rigged with a crossbar to make it appear to fly in the airless void. They collected rocks and soil, deploying scientific experiments, including a laser reflector we still use today to measure the moon's distance. They took a call from President Nixon, who called it the most historic phone call ever made. Meanwhile, Michael Collins orbited alone in the command module Columbia, the loneliest man in history, out of contact on the far side, holding the only ticket home for his two comrades. The symbolism was absolute. When Armstrong and Aldrin lifted off to rendezvous with Collins, they left behind a plaque that read, "We came in peace for all mankind." The space race, ignited by Sputnik's beep, ended not with a geopolitical victory, but with a human achievement that temporarily lifted the entire world above its earthly conflicts. It was the ultimate proof of what focused will, ingenuity, and immense courage could accomplish, a legacy not of who won, but of what we, as a species, could do. But that giant leap left a critical question hanging in the vacuum: what comes after the moon? The triumph of Apollo was a sprint, a spectacular dash to a finish line. Yet the true future of humanity in space required not sprinters, but settlers, people who could live and work in orbit for months, not days. The answer, born from leftover Apollo hardware, was a bold and ungainly new craft called Skylab. Launched on May 14, 1973, it was not a sleek capsule but a cavernous workshop, America's first space station, built from the hollowed-out third stage of a Saturn V rocket. Its mission was to prove humans could not just visit space, but inhabit it, conducting unprecedented science in solar astronomy, Earth resources, and the long-term effects of weightlessness on the human body. But just 63 seconds after liftoff, that grand ambition nearly shattered. During ascent, the critical micrometeoroid shield, designed to protect the station from tiny space debris and act as a thermal blanket, violently ripped away. The force of the tearing metal catastrophically damaged the station's two main solar array wings. One was ripped completely off, lost to space. The other was jammed shut, pinned against the station's hull by a strip of debris. Skylab was crippled, tumbling slowly in orbit, its power generation slashed and internal temperatures soaring past 130 degrees Fahrenheit. hot enough to ruin food, film, and make the interior utterly uninhabitable. The first crew, scheduled to launch the next day, was suddenly grounded. Engineers on Earth faced a nightmare scenario. A billion-dollar national asset was dying before it could be used. For 10 frantic days, they worked around the clock, devising a set of makeshift repairs that would have to be performed by astronauts in bulky suits in the harsh environment of orbit. They designed a parasol-like sunshade, a gold-coated nylon sheet that could be deployed through a small scientific airlock to create a new thermal barrier. They built custom tools, essentially long poles with cutting blades, to try and free the jammed solar panel. The world watched as the crew of Pete Conrad, Paul Weitz, and Joe Kerwin finally launched on May 25th, not on a mission of pure science, but of high-stakes orbital salvage. Docking with the crippled, spinning station was a harrowing feat of piloting. Once inside, they faced an oven-like heat, but they successfully deployed the makeshift sunshade, watching with relief as the temperature began to plummet. The most dramatic moment came during a precarious spacewalk, when Conrad and Kerwin used the improvised cutting tools to pry at the debris pinning the solar array. After a struggle that pushed them to their limits, the massive wing suddenly sprang open with a shudder they could feel through the entire station. Cheers erupted in mission control as power levels surged. The disaster had been averted. What followed was a triumph of improvisation. Over 3 separate crew rotations, Skylab became a prolific scientific outpost. Astronauts spent 28, 59, and then 84 days in space, shattering endurance records. They took thousands of revolutionary photographs of the Sun using a powerful telescope mount, capturing details of solar flares never seen before. They meticulously observed Earth's weather patterns, crop health, and geological features, proving the value of space-based Earth monitoring. And they subjected themselves to a battery of medical tests, providing the first comprehensive data on how prolonged weightlessness affects bone density, muscle mass, and cardiovascular health. Skylab was more than a station. It was a classroom and a laboratory that taught us the practical realities of living in space. It proved that with ingenuity and courage, astronauts could perform complex repairs in orbit, a lesson that would become the cornerstone of the Space Shuttle and International Space Station eras. The station itself eventually fell from orbit in 1979, scattering debris over the Indian Ocean and Western Australia. A fiery end for a workshop that had, against all odds, turned a launch pad disaster into a legacy of resilience and discovery. Skylab proved we could live in space, but the next mission would prove we could meet there as friends. By the mid-1970s, the frantic sprint of the moon race was over. The geopolitical landscape had shifted into a period known as détente, a cautious thaw in the Cold War. In this new atmosphere, a once unthinkable proposal became reality, a joint mission between the world's 2 space superpowers. The Apollo-Soyuz test project was not about setting records. It was about building a bridge, a single symbolic handshake 225 kilometers above the Earth. The technical hurdles were immense. The American Apollo and Soviet Soyuz spacecraft were products of entirely different engineering philosophies, speaking different technical languages. They used incompatible docking mechanisms and, most critically, different cabin atmospheres. Apollo used pure oxygen at low pressure, while Soyuz used a nitrogen-oxygen mix similar to Earth's air at sea level. For the crews to visit each other, a solution had to be invented from scratch. Engineers designed a special docking module, a cylindrical airlock that would act as a passport control and atmospheric translator. It would be carried by the Apollo spacecraft, and once docked with the Soyuz, it would allow the crews to equalize pressure and open the hatches. After years of meticulous planning and unprecedented sharing of technical data, the missions launched within hours of each other on July 15, 1975. The Soviet Soyuz 19, with cosmonauts Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov, went first. A few hours later, the American Apollo spacecraft, commanded by Tom Stafford with crewmates Deke Slayton and Vance Brand, followed. For 2 days, the two spacecraft performed a delicate orbital dance, aligning their paths. Then, over the French city of Metz, the public heard Tom Stafford's voice crackle over the radio, "Soyuz, Apollo. How do you read me?" The response from Alexei Leonov was clear, "Very well, hello everybody." With a soft thud heard by both crews, the docking latches engaged. The connection was solid. After equalizing pressure in the new docking module, the historic moment arrived. Tom Stafford opened the Apollo hatch, then the docking module hatch, and finally the Soyuz hatch. There, floating in the narrow tunnel, was Alexei Leonov, a wide grin on his face. They shook hands, an event broadcast live around the globe. The image was staggering. The commander of the first American spacewalk shaking hands with the commander of the first Soviet spacewalk, meeting in the neutral territory of orbit. For 2 days, the 5 men conducted joint experiments, shared meals, and exchanged gifts, including tree seeds that would later be planted in both countries. They gave televised tours in each other's spacecraft, a gesture of transparency that was itself a powerful message. The geopolitical symbolism was profound. Here, in the arena that had been the ultimate battlefield of the Cold War, the two rivals demonstrated that cooperation was not just possible, but productive. It was the formal, graceful end of the space race. The mission proved that the complex machinery of peace could be engineered, bolt by bolt and wire by wire, if the will existed. While tensions on Earth would ebb and flow for decades to come, Apollo-Soyuz established a vital precedent that the silent void above us could be a place for diplomacy, not just domination. It planted a seed for the future, a vision of international partnership where the next giant leap would not be taken by one nation alone. That handshake in orbit opened a door, but our next step would be a leap across the solar system. 1977 offered a celestial gift, a rare alignment of the outer planets that occurs only once every 176 years. This grand tour meant a single spacecraft, using the gravity of one world as a slingshot to the next, could visit Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in one epic journey. NASA seized the opportunity not with one, but 2 identical probes, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, launched just weeks apart. Their missions were the most ambitious robotic expeditions ever conceived, to unveil the secrets of the gas giants and their mysterious moons. The twin Voyagers were masterpieces of analog engineering, each carrying 11 sophisticated instruments on a 10-year-old computer with less memory than a modern car key fob. Their journeys were a cascade of revelations. Voyager 1 made the first detailed flyby of Jupiter in 1979, capturing the swirling, violent beauty of the Great Red Spot, a storm larger than Earth that has raged for centuries. But its most stunning discovery was on the moon Io, where it spotted plumes erupting into space. Io was volcanically active, the first world beyond Earth known to have erupting volcanoes, powered by the immense gravitational tug-of-war between Jupiter and its other moons. When Voyager 1 reached Saturn in 1980, it delivered breathtaking details of the planet's intricate ring system, revealing thousands of individual strands and strange, braided patterns. Its trajectory was then bent upward, out of the plane of the solar system, on a path toward interstellar space. Voyager 2, on a slower and more patient course, became the ultimate grand tourist. After its own stunning passes of Jupiter and Saturn, it continued where its twin could not, sailing on to the ice giants. In 1986, it became the first and only spacecraft to visit Uranus, revealing a featureless, blue-green world tipped on its side, with a bizarre magnetic field and a collection of dark, sharp-ringed moons. 3 years later, it reached Neptune, discovering supersonic winds and a great dark spot, a giant storm in that frigid blue atmosphere. Its close flyby of the large moon Triton showed geysers of nitrogen ice erupting from a surface colder than any other known in the solar system. But perhaps the most profound part of their mission was not about where they were going, but what they carried. Affixed to each probe's side is a gold-plated copper phonograph record, the Golden Record. It is a time capsule of Earth, containing greetings in 55 languages, the sounds of whales and thunderstorms, music from Bach to Chuck Berry, and 115 images encoded in analog form. It is a message in a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean, intended for any civilization that might one day find it, a testament to who we were in the late 20th century. Today, both Voyagers have left the protective bubble of the Sun's influence, the heliosphere, and entered the interstellar medium. They are now the farthest human-made objects from Earth, with Voyager 1 over 15 billion miles away, a distance so vast its radio signals take more than 22 hours to reach us. Powered by slowly decaying plutonium batteries, their instruments are being shut down one by one to conserve power. Sometime in the next few years, the final science instrument will fall silent. But the probes themselves will journey on forever, silent ambassadors carrying our golden whisper into the galactic dark. They redefined the outer solar system from points of light into dynamic, complex worlds, and in doing so, they turned our gaze permanently outward, reminding us that exploration is a story with no final chapter. The Voyagers were robotic pioneers, but the dream was always to make spaceflight as routine as an airline trip. That dream took shape as the Space Shuttle, a vehicle unlike any before it, part rocket, part plane, and entirely revolutionary. It was designed to be reused, flying back to Earth on wings and landing on a runway, promising to slash the astronomical cost of reaching orbit. For years, the public watched this strange, winged orbiter named Columbia undergo rigorous ground tests. But no one, not even its two veteran astronauts, knew if it would actually work. Commander John Young, a moonwalker, and pilot Bob Crippen, a rookie, were strapped into the shuttle's cockpit on April 12, 1981, the 20th anniversary of Gagarin's flight. They were sitting atop a vehicle that had never flown with a crew, bolted to a giant external fuel tank and two solid rocket boosters, an entirely new and terrifyingly complex stack of machinery. The solid boosters, once lit, could not be turned off. If anything went wrong during ascent, the crew's only escape was to eject their seats in a maneuver that was considered highly dangerous and only possible within a narrow window of the flight. The atmosphere at Cape Canaveral was thick with tension. As the countdown reached 0, the boosters ignited with a thunderous roar, and Columbia leapt from the pad. For 2 minutes, the astronauts endured a violent, shaking ride as the solids burned. Then, with a jolt, the boosters separated, and the main engines continued to push them toward orbit. The most critical moment came during re-entry, a fiery plunge no winged vehicle had ever survived. Columbia had to hit the atmosphere at just the right angle, its belly protected by over 30,000 fragile silica tiles, each one individually crafted to withstand temperatures hot enough to melt steel. A single missing tile could cause catastrophic heating and burn through the aluminum skin. Young and Crippen guided the silent, unpowered glider through the plasma of re-entry, finally emerging to see the California coastline. After a flawless approach, Columbia touched down on the dry lakebed at Edwards Air Force Base, rolling to a stop. The mission was a stunning success. Only later, during post-flight inspection, did engineers find a worrying detail. Several thermal tiles on the orbiter's tail had been damaged, likely by the overpressure shockwave from the solid rocket boosters during launch. It was a minor issue this time, but a stark warning of the system's vulnerability. The Space Shuttle era had begun not as routine travel, but as a breathtaking proof of concept. It promised a new chapter where satellites could be launched, repaired, and retrieved, where scientists could live and work in a shirt-sleeve environment in the Spacelab module carried in its payload bay, and where the construction of a permanent space station seemed not just possible, but inevitable. The sky, it seemed, was finally opening for business. The promise of routine spaceflight turned to ash on a cold January morning. The 25th launch of the Space Shuttle was meant to be different, carrying the first teacher, Krista McAuliffe, into orbit. Her presence transformed the mission into a national classroom event, with millions of schoolchildren watching live. The morning of January 28, 1986, was uncommonly frigid at the Kennedy Space Center, with temperatures dropping well below freezing. Ice glazed the launch tower, and engineers at Morton Thiokol, the company that built the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, voiced grave concerns. They knew a critical component, a synthetic rubber seal called an O-ring, lost its flexibility in the cold. These O-rings were designed to seal the joints between segments of the solid rocket boosters, preventing the escape of superheated gases. The engineers argued forcefully to delay the launch. But under pressure to maintain an ambitious flight schedule, managers overruled them. At 11:38 Eastern Time, Challenger rose into the clear blue sky. For 73 seconds, everything seemed normal. Then, a puff of dark smoke appeared near a joint on the right-hand booster. It was the compromised O-ring failing. A flickering pen flame of hot gas began to burn through the joint, then erupted into a blowtorch jet that pierced the giant external fuel tank. In an instant, the tank's structure failed, and its volatile liquid hydrogen and oxygen propellants mixed and ignited. On live television, Challenger was engulfed in a sudden, horrifying fireball, with the two solid rocket boosters careening away like crazed fireworks. The orbiter itself was torn apart by aerodynamic forces. The nation watched in stunned, silent disbelief, followed by a wave of collective grief unlike any since the assassination of a president. For days, the wreckage and the remains of the 7 astronauts fell into the Atlantic Ocean. The trauma was deep and personal because Krista McAuliffe had made space feel accessible, a journey one of us could take. The Rogers Commission, appointed to investigate, uncovered a chilling story of flawed engineering and catastrophic managerial failure. The O-ring problem was not new. It was a known and documented issue on previous flights, but it had been normalized, treated as an acceptable risk rather than an imminent danger. The commission concluded the disaster was rooted in a broken safety culture, where schedule pressure and a desire to maintain the illusion of routine flight had silenced crucial engineering concerns. The shuttle fleet was grounded for nearly 3 years. In that time, the solid rocket boosters were completely redesigned with a new joint and a third O-ring. More importantly, NASA underwent a profound organizational overhaul. A new Office of Safety, Reliability, and Quality Assurance was created with direct authority to halt any launch. Engineers were given a formal, protected channel to voice safety concerns without fear of reprisal. The Challenger disaster was a brutal lesson that in the business of riding rockets, there is no such thing as routine. Every launch is an experiment, and every precaution, no matter how inconvenient, is sacred. The sky had not opened for business, it had reminded humanity of the unforgiving price of admission. The sky had demanded humility, but our greatest eye upon the cosmos was born nearly blind. For decades, astronomers dreamed of a telescope liberated from Earth's shimmering atmosphere, a crystal-clear eye in the silent vacuum of space. That dream was named Hubble, a majestic, school bus-sized observatory designed to peer deeper into the universe than ever before. Its launch aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery in April 1990 was a moment of pure scientific euphoria. The world watched as the shuttle's robotic arm gently released the gleaming, solar-paneled telescope into its own orbit. Here was the tool that would finally answer our oldest questions, see to the edge of time, and capture the birth of stars. The promise was absolute. Then, the first test images arrived. Instead of pin-sharp points of light, the stars were surrounded by hazy, blurry halos. The pictures were barely better than those from ground-based telescopes. A sinking, cold dread spread through the control rooms. Something was terribly wrong. The diagnosis was a flaw of heartbreaking precision, a spherical aberration in Hubble's primary mirror. The painstakingly polished mirror, the very heart of the telescope, was too flat by a mere 1/50th the width of a human hair. That microscopic error, a mistake made during its grinding years before launch, meant the light reflecting from the edge of the mirror focused to a different point than light from the center. Every single image was fundamentally smeared. The telescope, a $2.2 billion masterpiece of engineering, was myopic. The meteor reaction was brutal, labeling Hubble a national embarrassment, a monument to NASA incompetence. Comedians told jokes about the blurry telescope, and congressional hearings were called to investigate the staggering failure. For the scientists and engineers who had dedicated their careers to the project, it was a profound personal devastation. Their perfect eye on the universe was broken, stranded 350 miles overhead. Yet within that crisis lay a seed of hope. The flaw was perfectly understood, and Hubble was built with a critical feature in mind: serviceability by astronauts. The mirror itself could not be replaced, but its faulty vision could be corrected with glasses. The mission to save Hubble became a desperate engineering sprint. Teams designed a set of corrective optics, a telephone booth-sized module called CoStar, containing 5 pairs of coin-sized mirrors that would intercept the blurred light and refocus it before it reached the instruments. They also built a new camera, the Wide Field and Planetary Camera 2, with its own internal corrective mirrors. Installing these components would require the most complex series of spacewalks ever attempted, a 5-day orbital repair job with no margin for error. The world held its breath, not in anticipation of discovery, but in a collective hope for redemption. The blurry vision was not the end of Hubble's story. It was the agonizing prelude to its greatest triumph, setting the stage for a rescue mission that would test the very limits of human ingenuity in the void. Redemption would require a high-wire act in the vacuum of space. The crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, launched in December 1993, carried the weight of scientific history on their shoulders. Their mission was Servicing Mission 1, a series of 5 grueling spacewalks to perform orbital surgery on the ailing telescope. The astronauts trained for over a year, rehearsing every tool movement and bolt turn in giant water tanks that simulated weightlessness. The plan was audacious. They had to capture Hubble with the shuttle's robotic arm, secure it in the payload bay, and then replace or install a total of 11 major components. The most critical items were the corrective optics module, CoStar, and the new Wide Field and Planetary Camera 2. The spacewalks were a ballet of precision under extreme pressure. Astronauts Story Musgrave and Jeff Hoffman floated into the shuttle's open bay, their every move broadcast to a nervous world. They had to open Hubble's giant doors, carefully remove the original camera, and install the new one. Later, they slid the telephone booth-sized CoStar unit into the heart of the telescope. The work was physically exhausting, with tasks requiring immense hand strength in bulky gloves, and mentally taxing, as a single lost bolt or torn glove could doom the entire mission. After 5 days of meticulous work, the new hardware was in place. The moment of truth came when ground controllers sent commands to close Hubble's aperture door and power up the new systems. The first test image was of a star field in the constellation Dorado. When it appeared on the monitors, the room erupted. The stars were no longer fuzzy blobs, but perfect, pin-sharp points of light. The repair was a flawless success. Hubble could finally see. The before and after images were not just a technical correction, they were a transformation from punchline to powerhouse. Almost overnight, the telescope began to rewrite the textbooks. Its first great revelation was to pin down the age of the universe with unprecedented accuracy. By measuring the brightness of pulsating stars called Cepheid variables in distant galaxies, Hubble provided the data to calculate the expansion rate of the cosmos, determining the universe was approximately 13.8 billion years old. Then, by observing distant supernova, Hubble made an even more startling discovery. Astronomers expected the universe's expansion to be slowing down due to gravity. Instead, Hubble's data proved it was speeding up, driven by a mysterious, repulsive force we now call dark energy. This finding, which earned a Nobel Prize, completely overturned our understanding of cosmic fate. Beyond these profound cosmological shifts, Hubble gifted humanity with a new visual lexicon of the cosmos. It delivered the iconic Pillars of Creation image, towering columns of gas and dust in the Eagle Nebula where new stars are being born. It captured the deep field images, pointing at a seemingly empty patch of sky for days to reveal thousands of galaxies, each a swirl of stars stretching back to the early universe. It studied weather on other planets, watched comets collide with Jupiter, and peered into the violent hearts of galaxies. Hubble became more than a telescope. It became a time machine and a shared window on infinity. Its data has been the foundation for over 20,000 scientific papers, making it arguably the most productive scientific instrument ever built. It turned abstract equations into breathtaking portraits, making the universe accessible not just to astronomers, but to every person with a sense of wonder. Hubble's story is the ultimate testament to human resilience, a journey from humiliating failure to glorious triumph, proving that even our greatest mistakes can be corrected if we have the courage to reach for them. Hubble gave us the eyes to see the universe, but our next destination demanded a new kind of touch. After the expensive, monumental projects of the past, NASA entered the 1990s with a radically different mantra: faster, better, cheaper. The goal was to break the cycle of billion-dollar, decade-long missions and instead launch smaller, more frequent probes that could take bigger risks. The ultimate test of this philosophy was not a grand observatory, but a lander bound for the red, rocky plains of Mars. Its name was Pathfinder, and its mission was to prove that exploring another world did not have to be slow, cumbersome, or exorbitantly expensive. The entire project, from approval to launch, took just 3 years and cost under $250 million, a fraction of previous interplanetary missions. But to achieve this, engineers had to throw out the old playbook. Previous landers, like the Vikings in the 1970s, had used complex and heavy retro-rocket systems to make a gentle, controlled descent. Pathfinder's solution was brilliantly simple and utterly audacious. It would crash into Mars. The spacecraft would slam into the thin Martian atmosphere at over 16,000 miles per hour, deploy a parachute to slow down, and then, in its final seconds before impact, inflate a cocoon of giant airbags. It would then cut itself free, plummet to the surface and bounce like a giant beach ball across the rocky terrain until it rolled to a stop. No one knew if this would work. On July 4, 1997, the world watched the data stream in. After a 7-month cruise, Pathfinder entered the Martian atmosphere. For the anxious team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, there was a 6-minute communication delay, meaning every piece of good news they received was already 6 minutes old. The parachute deployed, the airbags inflated, and then the signal cut out as expected during the violent bouncing phase. The team waited, staring at their screens. Then, after a tense silence, a faint but clear signal returned. Pathfinder had survived. It had bounced over 50 feet into the air at least 15 times before coming to rest in a region called Ares Valleys. When the airbags deflated and the petal-like sides of the lander opened, it revealed a tiny, 6-wheeled companion named Sojourner. This microwave oven-sized rover was the first of its kind, a robotic geologist on wheels. It rolled gingerly down a ramp onto the rusty soil, its wheels leaving the first tire tracks on another planet. For 83 days, far exceeding its planned 7-day mission, Sojourner puttered around the lander, analyzing rocks with its alpha proton X-ray spectrometer. It examined a rock nicknamed Barnacle Bill, then Yogi and Squash, sending back data that suggested a water-rich past. But the mission's most revolutionary impact was not just geological, it was cultural. For the first time, NASA set up a public website and uploaded raw images from the surface of Mars almost as soon as they were received. The world did not have to wait for the evening news or a press conference. They could refresh their browsers and see a new panorama from another planet. The website crashed under the traffic, with over 500 million hits in the first month alone. Pathfinder and its little rover made Mars exploration a daily, democratic event. A shared adventure unfolding in real time on computer screens across the globe. It proved that the faster, better, cheaper model could yield spectacular success, and it single-handedly revitalized public passion for Mars. Every rover that followed, from the golf cart-sized Spirit and Opportunity to the car-sized Curiosity and Perseverance, owes its existence to the bouncing beach ball and the tiny trailblazer that rolled out from its pedals, turning a distant red dot into a place we could visit, one pixel at a time. Pathfinder's tiny tracks were a promise of new worlds to explore, but our greatest achievement would be learning to build a home between them. For decades, the dream of a permanent human presence in space had floated as science fiction, a vision of a spinning wheel in the void. That fiction became a complex, fragile reality on November 20, 1998. From the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, a Russian Proton rocket lifted into the sky, carrying not a complete station, but a cornerstone. Its payload was a module named Zarya, which means sunrise. This 42,000-pound cylinder, funded by the United States but built by Russia, was the first piece of a puzzle so vast it would require the cooperation of 15 nations. Zarya was not glamorous, it was functional. A powerhouse designed to provide propulsion, power, and storage for the structure to come. Its successful orbit was a sigh of relief, the first irreversible step in a 20-year construction project. But the true miracle was not engineering, it was diplomatic. This station was born from the ashes of the Cold War. With the Soviet Union dissolved, its once secret space program was in dire straits, rich in expertise but bankrupt in funds. America's own space station plans, named Freedom, were over budget and stuck in political gridlock. In a move of stunning pragmatism, old enemies became essential partners. Former Soviet rocket scientists, who once designed missiles to threaten American cities, were now collaborating with NASA engineers to design modules for peaceful habitation. The International Space Station would merge Russian reliability in long-duration spaceflight with American technological ambition, and then expand to include the robotic arms of Canada, the sophisticated laboratories of Europe and Japan. Every bolt, every computer code, every life support system had to be compatible, a task requiring a level of trust and technical harmony never before attempted on such a scale. Zarya's lonely orbit lasted only 2 weeks before the next piece arrived. The Space Shuttle Endeavour launched, carrying the American-built Unity node. In a delicate orbital ballet, the shuttle's crew used its robotic arm to capture Zarya and gently dock it with Unity. When the hatches were opened, the first crew to enter the joined modules found not just empty space, but the tangible beginning of a new era. The handshake of Apollo-Soyuz was now a permanent embrace. This was no longer a symbolic mission. It was the literal laying of a foundation in the sky, a declaration that the future in space would be built not by one nation, but by all of humanity together. The foundation was now laid, but a structure is not a home. For 2 years after Zarya and Unity were joined, the International Space Station grew piece by piece, a skeletal framework of modules and trusses assembled in orbit by shuttle crews. Yet it remained empty, a silent collection of pressurized hallways and exposed metal waiting for its first inhabitants. That wait ended on October 31, 2000. From the same launch pad that sent Yuri Gagarin into history, a Russian Soyuz rocket lifted off, carrying 3 men on a mission unlike any before. They were not visiting, they were moving in. American astronaut Bill Shepard and Russian cosmonauts Yuri Gidzenko and Sergei Krikalev were Expedition 1, the station's first full-time crew. Their Soyuz capsule, a design older than they were, docked with the station 2 days later. On November 2nd, they opened the hatch and floated into their new, cavernous and utterly dark home. The station was only partially powered, with many systems still dormant. Their first task was literally to turn the lights on, activating life support and bringing the cold, silent modules to life. For 4 months, they lived in what amounted to a construction site, with limited privacy, a constant hum of machinery, and a schedule dominated by the complex choreography of unpacking and assembly. They welcomed the first visiting shuttle, which delivered the giant solar arrays that would finally give the station its signature wings and full power. The challenges were relentless, from troubleshooting balky air scrubbers to managing the delicate ballet of cargo transfers. Yet within that chaotic routine, something profound was being proven. For the first time in history, Earth was not the only place where humans lived. The unbroken chain of human presence in space had begun, a chain that continues to this day, every single hour, for over 23 years and counting. This was the quiet, grinding birth of a new chapter in our story. The station was not a destination, but a springboard. It became the ultimate laboratory, a place to study how fire behaves in microgravity, how crystals form with perfect purity, and most critically, how the human body deteriorates over time without Earth's gravity. Bones lose density, muscles atrophy, and vision can change. Understanding these effects is not academic. It is the absolute prerequisite for any future journey to Mars. Expedition 1 turned a symbol of international cooperation into a working, breathing reality. They proved we could not only visit space, but truly live there, setting the stage for thousands of experiments that would push the boundaries of medicine, materials science, and our understanding of the universe itself. The sky was no longer a frontier to be crossed. It was a neighborhood we had begun to inhabit. Living in space had become a reality, but the journey home remained a perilous gauntlet of fire. On January 16, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia lifted off on a marathon 16-day science mission. Its crew of 7 dedicated to round-the-clock research in its spacious laboratory module. Commander Rick Husband, pilot Willie McCool, and mission specialists Kalpana Chawla, Laurel Clark, Michael Anderson, David Brown, and Ilan Ramon, Israel's first astronaut, represented the shuttle's promise, a diverse team turning orbit into a workshop for humanity's benefit. 82 seconds after launch, a routine event unfolded with catastrophic consequences. A briefcase-sized chunk of insulating foam broke off from the giant external fuel tank and struck the leading edge of Columbia's left wing at over 500 miles per hour. Cameras recorded the impact, but the grainy footage was inconclusive. Engineers on the ground filed a report, concerned, but after a series of meetings, managers concluded the strike was not a safety-of-flight issue. Foam had shed on previous flights, they reasoned, and while it was a problem to fix later, it had never caused critical damage. The crew was informed, but assured there was no concern for re-entry. For over 2 weeks, Columbia orbited flawlessly, the crew conducting nearly 100 experiments in biology, physics, and materials science. On the morning of February 1st, they fired their engines to begin the hour-long descent to Florida. As Columbia pierced the upper atmosphere over the Pacific, the searing heat of re-entry began to build. Unknown to the crew or controllers, the foam impact had punched a fatal hole in the wing's reinforced carbon-carbon leading edge. Superheated plasma, reaching temperatures near 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, seeped inside the wing's aluminum structure like a blowtorch. Over Texas, at an altitude of 200,000 feet, sensors in the left wing began to fail. Mission Control heard Commander Husband's final, truncated transmission. Then, at 8:59 in the morning, Central Time, the orbiter, traveling at 18 times the speed of sound, disintegrated in a trail of white streaks and tumbling debris against a clear blue sky. The nation watched in a horrifying replay of grief. as pieces of the shuttle and the remains of the crew scattered across 2 states. The Columbia Accident Investigation Board delivered a verdict that was a devastating echo of the Challenger report 17 years earlier. The technical cause was the foam strike, but the organizational cause was again a broken safety culture. The board found that NASA had normalized foam shedding, treating it as a maintenance issue rather than a potentially catastrophic threat. Managers had dismissed engineers' requests for clearer imagery of the wing damage, and a culture of schedule pressure, despite the station construction milestones, had eroded rigorous caution. The shuttle fleet was grounded for over 2 years. While it would fly again to complete the International Space Station, the fundamental truth was laid bare: the winged orbiter was an inherently vulnerable and aging machine. The Columbia disaster forced an irrevocable decision: the space shuttle program would be retired. America, the nation that had built reusable spaceships, would soon have no way to launch its own astronauts into orbit. This painful admission became a catalyst, forcing a complete and uncomfortable rethink of national space strategy, a retreat to simpler capsules to survive the journey, and a desperate push toward a future beyond low Earth orbit. Columbia's loss forced a painful retreat, but on another world, 2 tiny explorers were just getting started. While the shuttle program regrouped, a pair of identical robotic geologists were already hurtling toward Mars, each cocooned in the same daring airbag system that Pathfinder had pioneered. Their names were Spirit and Opportunity, and their mission was to search for the history of water. They arrived in January 2004, 3 weeks apart, in a spectacular display of interplanetary precision. Each lander, encased in its protective bouncing sphere, slammed into the Martian atmosphere, deployed a parachute, and then, in the final seconds, free fell to the surface, bouncing and rolling to a stop. Spirit landed first inside Gusev Crater, a location chosen because it resembled a dry lakebed. Opportunity touched down halfway around the planet on Meridiani Planum, a flat plain chosen for its deposits of a mineral called hematite, which often forms in water. The tension in the control rooms was electric. When Opportunity's first images blinked onto the screens, scientists gasped. The rover had not just landed safely, it had scored a cosmic hole-in-one. Its landing had bounced it into a small, shallow crater, and its cameras were staring directly at an outcrop of bedrock, a layered geological storybook lying just feet away. Even more astonishing was the ground itself. It was littered with tiny, spherical concretions that scientists immediately nicknamed blueberries. These were the hematite spheres, and their presence was a scientific thunderclap. Hematite of this type forms in the presence of liquid water. This was not a suggestion or a theory based on orbital imagery. This was proof, lying on the ground, that the plains of Meridiani had once been soaked. Opportunity had, within its first hours, achieved its primary mission objective. It had found definitive evidence of a wet past. As the twin rovers rolled off their landers, their 90-day warranties began. Spirit, true to its name, proved resilient. Its landing site was less immediately spectacular, but it soon found rocks that had been altered by water. Then it climbed a series of hills, providing panoramic vistas no robot had ever seen, and discovered silica-rich soil that hinted at past hydrothermal activity, a potential haven for ancient microbial life. The rovers were not just machines, they became personalities. Earthbound teams lived on Martian time, their days shifting 40 minutes later each day to match the rover's schedule. They faced constant peril, from treacherous sand traps that nearly ended Spirit's mission to dust storms that coated the solar panels and threatened to starve them of power. Yet they endured. 90 days became 1 year, then 2, then 5. Spirit eventually became stuck in soft soil, and after 6 years of trailblazing, fell silent. But Opportunity, the little rover that could, kept going. It drove from crater to crater, finding more evidence of ancient acidic lakes and streams. It survived dust storms by powering down into a protective hibernation, then waking when the skies cleared. It drove over 28 miles across the Martian surface, a record for off-world travel. These two machines transformed Mars from a static, rusty desert in our minds into a dynamic world with a complex geological resume. They painted a picture of a planet that once had lakes, flowing groundwater, and possibly even a thicker atmosphere that could have supported life. They far outlived their design, operating for years, because the teams on Earth learned to drive them with exquisite care and ingenuity, treating each command as a precious opportunity. They taught us that Mars was not just a destination, but a world with a story to tell, a story written in stone and water, patiently waiting for a visitor with a wheeled chassis and a curious eye. Opportunity's final transmission was a whisper from a dusty world, but a new voice was already calling from the solar system's frozen edge. For decades, Pluto was a pixelated mystery, a faint and blurry dot at the very limit of our vision. We knew it was there, a lonely sentinel in the dark, but its secrets were locked behind 3 billion miles of empty space. That changed with a piano-sized probe named New Horizons, launched in January 2006 with a singular, audacious goal: to be the first spacecraft to visit this distant king of the Kuiper Belt. Its journey was an epic exercise in patience, a 9-year cruise across the solar system. To save time, it took a gravity assist from Jupiter, using the giant planet's pull like a slingshot to gain speed. For most of its long voyage, it hiberned, its systems silent except for periodic check-ins with Earth. The team that built it waited, their careers measured in the slow crawl of telemetry across the ever-widening gulf. Then, in the summer of 2015, New Horizons woke up for its final approach. The anticipation was a palpable force in the control room. Each new image that trickled back was better than the last, transforming Pluto from a fuzzy ball into a discernible world. Then, on July 14th, the probe made its closest approach, screaming past at over 30,000 miles per hour, its instruments drinking in every possible detail during a frantic, precious flyby. The data took over 16 months to fully transmit home, but the first high-resolution images were immediate and breathtaking. Pluto was not a dead, cratered ice ball. It was stunningly, vibrantly alive with geology. There were towering mountains, but not of rock. These peaks, soaring over 11,000 feet high, were made of water ice, hard as granite in the deep cold. They stood guard over a vast, heart-shaped plain named Tombaugh Regio, a sweeping basin filled not with ice, but with flowing glaciers of solid nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide. This was a landscape in motion, with convection cells slowly churning the frozen plains like a cosmic lava lamp. The surface showed no craters in these regions, meaning it was geologically young, constantly being resurfaced by processes no one fully understood. Perhaps most astonishing was the evidence of a thin, hazy atmosphere, with layers of photochemical smog creating a dramatic blue halo in backlit images. New Horizons revealed a world of shocking complexity and beauty, a dynamic dwarf planet with weather, geology, and possibly even a subsurface ocean. After the flyby, the probe continued its journey deeper into the Kuiper Belt, later visiting a small, two-lobed object named Arrokoth, which looked like a flattened snowman and provided a pristine fossil from the solar system's dawn. The mission did more than just map Pluto. It completed humanity's initial survey of the classical solar system. From Mercury to Pluto, we had now visited every planet known at the start of the space age. In doing so, it fundamentally reshaped our understanding of these distant frozen realms. Pluto was not an oddity, it was a prototype, revealing that the cold, dark reaches of our solar system are not dormant, but host to small, active worlds that defy our expectations. The last world had been first seen in detail, and in its icy heart, we found a universe of new questions waiting in the dark. Pluto's frozen heart revealed a new kind of world, but our next discovery did not rely on light at all. For a century, Scientists had been listening for a whisper from the cosmos predicted by Albert Einstein himself. In his theory of general relativity, Einstein proposed that massive accelerating objects, like colliding black holes, would ripple the very fabric of spacetime itself, sending out waves of gravitational energy traveling at the speed of light. He also thought these waves would be so infinitesimally faint by the time they reached Earth that they would be forever undetectable. Proving him wrong became one of physics' greatest quests. It required building an instrument of almost unimaginable sensitivity, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO. This was not a telescope, but an enormous listening device. It consists of two identical facilities, one in Louisiana and one in Washington state, separated by nearly 2,000 miles to rule out local vibrations like earthquakes or passing trucks. Each facility is shaped like a giant letter L, with two arms, each exactly 2.5 miles long. Inside those long, vacuum-sealed tubes, a laser beam is split and sent racing down each arm, reflected by mirrors and then recombined. In perfect calm, the light waves cancel each other out. But if a gravitational wave passes through Earth, it would ever so slightly stretch one arm of the L while compressing the other, changing the distance the laser light travels by an amount thousands of times smaller than the width of a single proton. This minute change would make the light waves fall out of sync, creating a detectable flicker. After decades of design, construction, and upgrades to reach this phenomenal sensitivity, Advanced LIGO began its first official observing run in September 2015. Then, on the morning of September 14th, even before the formal run began, a signal arrived. At both facilities, 3,000 kilometers apart, the identical pattern appeared. It was a distinctive chirp, a rapid rise in frequency and amplitude that lasted just 0.2 of a second. The computers flagged it immediately. The researchers, initially suspecting a blind test or a glitch, began a painstaking weeks-long analysis. The signal was real. That chirp was the sound of two black holes, one about 29 times the mass of our Sun and the other 36 times, locked in a final, fatal dance over 1 billion light-years away. In their last milliseconds, they whirled around each other at nearly half the speed of light before merging into a single, more massive black hole. In that cataclysm, an amount of energy equivalent to 3 times the mass of our Sun was converted into pure gravitational waves, rippling outward across the universe. That faint tremor, after traveling for over 1 billion years, had finally reached us. The announcement in February 2016 sent shockwaves through the scientific community. This was not seeing the universe, it was hearing it for the very first time. We had opened a completely new window on the cosmos, one that could perceive the most violent and invisible events, like the collisions of neutron stars and the birth of black holes. It was the direct confirmation of a key prediction of general relativity and the beginning of an entirely new field of astronomy, where we don't just observe the light of the heavens, but feel its very heartbeat. That faint tremor from colliding black holes was a new way to listen to the universe. But another sound was about to change everything on the ground, the thunderous roar of a rocket landing back where it started. For decades, the dream of a fully reusable rocket was the holy grail of spaceflight, a fantasy that promised to slash the astronomical cost of reaching orbit. Every rocket ever built, from the mighty Saturn V to the Space Shuttle's external tank, was used once and then discarded, a multi-million-dollar piece of hardware thrown into the ocean or burned up in the atmosphere. It was like building a brand new airliner for every single flight across the Atlantic. The economics were fundamentally broken, a wall that kept space the exclusive domain of governments and a few wealthy satellites. Then came a company with a different vision and a willingness to fail spectacularly in public. SpaceX, founded by entrepreneur Elon Musk, approached the problem not as a government agency avoiding risk, but as a Silicon Valley startup obsessed with iteration. Their mantra was test, fail, fix, fly. Their early attempts at building a reusable rocket stage were not sleek orbital boosters, but a bizarre, homemade-looking prototype called Grasshopper, a spindly metal tower that would lift off, hover, and land back on its own legs. It looked more like a science fair project than a spaceship, and its tests were conducted openly, with videos of hops and occasional fiery failures posted online for all to see. This transparent, iterative culture was a radical departure from the traditional aerospace world. The goal was the Falcon 9 rocket, a workhorse designed to launch satellites. Its first stage, the massive bottom portion containing 9 main engines and most of the fuel, would separate after doing its job and fall back to Earth. Instead of letting it crash, SpaceX aimed to guide it back through the atmosphere, reignite its engines and set it down gently, either on a drone ship in the ocean or back on solid ground. The first attempts ended in explosions, the stages tipping over or slamming into the drone ship, which the company wryly named, "Just read the instructions." Each failure was a data point, a lesson learned and immediately applied. Then, on December 21, 2015, a Falcon 9 launched from Cape Canaveral, pushing 11 small satellites into orbit. As the second stage continued on, the first stage began its lonely, fiery journey back. It re-entered the atmosphere, its engines flaring to life in a series of 3 braking burns, fighting gravity and momentum. To spectators on the ground, it looked like a strange, slow-moving meteor falling from the sky, accompanied by a series of sonic booms that rattled windows across the space coast. Over Landing Zone 1, a former missile test site, the booster descended on a single column of flame, its 4 landing legs deploying at the last second. It touched down, perfectly upright, in a cloud of dust and smoke. The signal from the onboard camera showed a stable, stationary rocket where, just minutes before, there had been only a concrete pad. For a moment, there was stunned silence in the SpaceX webcast, followed by unrestrained cheers. They had done it. A 20-story tall orbital rocket had launched a payload to space and then landed itself, ready to be refueled and flown again. The significance was earth-shattering. This was not just a technical stunt. It was the moment the economic equation of spaceflight flipped on its head. Reusability promised to reduce launch costs by an order of magnitude, transforming access to orbit from a prohibitively expensive endeavor into something approaching routine. It catalyzed the entire commercial space sector, proving that private companies could not only match but innovate beyond government programs. That single, soot-stained booster, standing silently on the launch pad, marked the end of an old era and the explosive beginning of a new one where the sky was finally, truly opening for business. That soot-stained booster proved we could reach orbit affordably, but the ultimate question remained unanswered. Are we alone? The search for life beyond Earth had long been a game of patience and speculation, focused on distant, unreachable stars. Then, in February 2017, astronomers pointed their telescopes toward a small, unremarkable star, just 40 light-years away in the constellation Aquarius. It was an ultra-cool dwarf star, so faint and cool you could not see it with the naked eye, a cosmic ember named TRAPPIST-1. The initial discovery, made by a ground-based telescope in Chile also named TRAPPIST, was startling enough. It found 3 Earth-sized worlds orbiting this tiny star. But the real revelation came from NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope, an infrared observatory that stared at the system for 21 days straight. The data it collected was nothing short of revolutionary. TRAPPIST-1 was not hosting 3 planets. It was home to 7 rocky worlds, all roughly the size of Earth, all orbiting closer to their dim star than Mercury orbits our Sun. Because the star is so cool and faint, its habitable zone, the region where liquid water could exist on a planet's surface, is incredibly close in. And within that narrow, life-friendly band, not 1, but 3 of these 7 worlds were found to orbit. The entire system is compact enough that if you stood on the surface of one of these worlds, You could look up and see the neighboring planets in your sky, some appearing larger than our moon, their geological features potentially visible to the naked eye. It is a solar system in miniature, a packed neighborhood of potential Earths. Follow-up observations by the Hubble Space Telescope began the next critical phase, scanning for atmospheres. The starlight filtering through the thin gaseous envelopes of these worlds, if they have them, carries chemical fingerprints. Early results suggested the inner planets likely have compact, rocky atmospheres like Venus or none at all, stripped away by the star's radiation. But the outer worlds, those precious three in the habitable zone, showed signs of having lighter, puffier atmospheres, possibly rich in hydrogen or even water vapor. The implications are profound. For the first time, we did not have to imagine a single, distant Earth like exoplanet. We had a target-rich environment, a complete laboratory for comparative planetology, right in our cosmic backyard. The upcoming James Webb Space Telescope was designed for this exact moment. Its powerful infrared gaze can dissect the light passing through these planets' atmospheres, searching for the biosignatures of life, like oxygen, methane, or the complex chemistry of an industrial civilization. TRAPPIST-1 transformed the search for life from a philosophical quest into a tangible, immediate engineering problem. We now have a street address, a real place to point our most advanced tools. The discovery asks a hauntingly beautiful question: if life can arise in such a quiet, dim corner of the galaxy around such a humble star, then how common might it truly be across the silent, star-filled dark? The search for alien worlds asks what might live out there, but a deeper mystery was what shape the darkness itself takes. We had heard the collision of black holes through gravitational waves, yet seeing one remained an impossible dream. These cosmic monsters are defined by their event horizon, the point of no return where gravity is so strong not even light can escape. By their very nature, they are invisible. To photograph one would require a telescope as large as the entire planet. So that is precisely what scientists built. The Event Horizon Telescope was not a single instrument, but a global alliance of 8 radio observatories spanning from the high deserts of Chile to the peaks of Hawaii, from the frigid landscape of the South Pole to the mountains of Spain. By synchronizing these dishes with atomic clocks and having them all stare at the same point in the sky at the same time, they combined their power to create a virtual dish the size of Earth itself. Their target was not the black hole at our galaxy's center, which is obscured by cosmic dust, but a behemoth 55 million light-years away, the supermassive black hole at the heart of galaxy Messier 87. This colossal object contains the mass of 6.5 billion suns, crushed into a singularity. For over a week in April 2017, every observatory in the network pointed at M87, collecting waves of radio light emitted by the superheated gas swirling at light speed around the event horizon. They gathered petabytes of data, so much information it was faster to fly physical hard drives on airplanes to a central processing facility than to send it over the internet. Then began the years-long task of correlation and analysis, a painstaking digital reconstruction performed by teams across the globe. The world waited. On April 10, 2019, the result was unveiled in coordinated press conferences on 6 continents. The image was instantly iconic, a glowing, fuzzy ring of orange and yellow light encircling a perfect circle of profound darkness. This was the black hole's shadow, the silhouette of its event horizon backlit by the frenzied glow of matter about to be consumed. That dark central void was not the black hole itself, but the absence of all light, a window into the ultimate gravitational prison. The bright ring was exactly as Einstein's equations had predicted a century before, light bent by unimaginable gravity into a perfect circle. This was not an artist's impression. It was a direct, visual confirmation of one of the most extreme predictions in all of physics. The image was a triumph of human cooperation on a planetary scale. a testament to what we can achieve when we align our tools and our minds toward a single, seemingly impossible goal. It made the invisible visible, turning a mathematical certainty into a shared human experience. We had finally stared into the abyss, and the abyss, in its own silent, radiant way, had stared back. Staring into that cosmic abyss required a perfect eye, but our greatest one was still folded up, waiting in a warehouse. The James Webb Space Telescope was an idea born in the shadows of Hubble's early success, a dream so ambitious it flirted with impossibility. Its goal was simple to state and staggering to achieve: to see the first stars and galaxies that ignited after the Big Bang, light that has been stretched into the infrared by the universe's expansion over more than 13 billion years. To catch that ancient whisper, Webb needed a mirror over 6 times larger than Hubble's, and it had to be kept colder than Pluto to avoid its own heat drowning out the faint signals. For 25 years, through budget overruns that nearly saw it cancelled and technical hurdles that stumped the world's best engineers, the telescope took shape. It was a masterpiece of origami, a gold-plated mirror over 21 feet wide, segmented into 18 hexagonal pieces, and a sunshield the size of a tennis court, all designed to fold up inside a rocket and then unfurl a million miles from Earth. The pressure was immense, a $10 billion gamble on a single, flawless deployment. On Christmas morning, 2021, an Ariane 5 rocket lifted off from French Guiana, carrying the precious, folded observatory. The launch was perfect, but for the team, it was only the beginning of the most anxiety-inducing fortnight in scientific history. Over the next 2 weeks, as Webb sailed toward its destination at the second Lagrange point, it had to perform a series of 344 single-point failures, steps that had to work perfectly the first time, with no astronauts nearby to fix a mistake. The world watched via animated simulations as the telescope slowly came to life. The solar array deployed. Then the delicate sunshield, a 5-layered foil umbrella, had to tension without snagging. Finally, the golden mirror itself unfolded, each segment moving into place with microscopic precision. When the final instrument cooled to its operating temperature and the first calibration images aligned, the relief was euphoric. The successor to Hubble had opened its eye. Almost immediately, it began rewriting cosmic history. Its first deep-field image peered further back in time than ever before, revealing galaxies as they existed just a few 100 million years after the universe began, smaller, more chaotic, and more numerous than any model predicted. It analyzed the atmospheres of exoplanets like those in the TRAPPIST-1 system, detecting water vapor and carbon dioxide around worlds light years away. It saw through the dust of stellar nurseries, showing the vivid pillars of gas where new solar systems are born in stunning, unprecedented clarity. James Webb is not just a better telescope. It is a time machine and a chemical analyzer, a tool built to answer the 2 greatest questions: how did we get here, and are we alone? It carries the collective hope of every astronomer who ever looked up and wondered. A promise that the next chapter of the universe's story will be written not in theory, but in light captured by a golden eye that finally learned how to see. The universe's oldest light arrived as a series of postcards from the void. In July 2022, the world held its breath as NASA prepared to unveil the James Webb Space Telescope's first full-color science images. What appeared on screens was not just data, it was a visual revolution. The first image, Webb's first deep field, targeted a patch of sky the size of a grain of sand held at arm's length. Hubble had stared at this same dark spot for weeks to see distant galaxies. Webb, with its infrared eye, looked for just 12 hours and saw straight through cosmic dust and time itself. The image was a cosmic jewel box, packed with thousands of galaxies, some as faint red smudges that existed when the universe was less than a billion years old. These were not the majestic spirals we know, but chaotic, clumpy infants, forming stars at a ferocious rate and challenging every assumption about how galaxies assemble. Then came the Carina Nebula, a stellar nursery Hubble had made famous as towering pillars. Webb's view was different. A haunting landscape Webb pierced the obscuring dust to reveal hundreds of previously hidden newborn stars, their powerful jets carving cavernous bubbles in the cosmic cliffs. It was a snapshot of creation itself, raw and violent. Next was Stephan's Quintet, a visual dance of 5 galaxies in a gravitational tug-of-war. Webb's mid-infrared vision highlighted the brilliant glow of star clusters and the sweeping tails of gas and dust torn loose by their interactions, along with the brilliant shockwaves of one galaxy plowing through the heart of the group. The final target was not an image, but a graph that told a story just as profound. Webb trained its spectrograph on WASP 96b, a giant, puffy exoplanet over 1,000 light-years away. As the planet passed in front of its star, starlight filtered through its atmosphere, and Webb broke that light into a rainbow. The resulting spectrum held the unmistakable fingerprint of water vapor, along with evidence of haze and clouds. For the first time, we could read the weather report of a world in another solar system. The immediate impact was a seismic shift in astrophysics. Webb was confirming theories and shattering them in the same breath. By analyzing the chemistry of exoplanet atmospheres, we are now hunting for the building blocks of life on worlds we will never visit. By seeing galaxies that formed earlier and faster than any model predicted, we are being forced to rewrite the first chapters of cosmic history. The James Webb Space Telescope is not just observing the universe. It is conducting an interrogation, asking the cosmos its deepest secrets and receiving answers in a language of light we have only just begun to translate. Webb's golden eye looks back to cosmic dawn, but another spacecraft took aim at a target closer to home, not to observe but to strike. For the first time in history, humanity decided to move a celestial object. The mission was called DART, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, a bold and practical experiment in planetary defense. Its target was not a threat to Earth, but a perfect test subject, a binary asteroid system. The larger asteroid, Didymos, is about half a mile across. Orbiting it like a tiny moon is a 500-foot-wide rock named Dimorphos. This moonlet was the bullseye. The concept was elegantly simple. If a dangerous asteroid were ever found on a collision course with Earth, could we nudge it off its path just enough to miss? DART was built to answer that question with a kinetic impactor, essentially a high-tech battering ram. On September 26, 2022, after a 10-month journey, the refrigerator-sized DART spacecraft closed in on the Didymos system. In its final hour, it was flying blind, guided solely by its autonomous navigation system. It had to distinguish the small moonlet Dimorphos from its larger parent asteroid and steer itself toward a direct hit. A tiny CubeSat companion, deployed weeks earlier, watched from a safe distance to record the event. As DART raced toward its target at over 14,000 miles per hour, its camera sent back 1 image per second. To the team on Earth, the screen showed the gray, rocky surface of Dimorphos growing from a pixelated dot into a detailed landscape of boulders and rubble. There was no explosion, no dramatic fireball in the airless void. The final image, transmitted just seconds before impact, showed a field of rocks right up to the moment the signal was lost. DART had smashed directly into the asteroid. The real test, however, was not the impact itself, but the measurement that followed. Astronomers around the world turned their telescopes on the asteroid system, watching for a telltale change in brightness as Dimorphos passed in front of and behind Didymos. They were measuring the moonlet's orbital period, the time it took to complete 1 loop around its parent. The impact was designed to transfer DART momentum to Dimorphos, slowing it down slightly and shortening its orbit. Before the impact, Dimorphos's orbit took 11 hours and 55 minutes. Weeks of careful observation confirmed the stunning result. the orbit had been shortened by 32 minutes. The kinetic deflection technique worked far better than the most optimistic models had predicted. The impact did not just give the asteroid a gentle nudge, it created a massive ejecta plume of rock and dust, like a jet of material shooting out into space. This recoil effect provided a significant extra push, amplifying the deflection. The DART mission was a resounding, unequivocal success. It proved that with enough advance warning, we possess the capability to defend our planet from a catastrophic asteroid impact. We are no longer passive passengers on a rock orbiting the Sun. We have taken our first, tentative step toward becoming pilots, with the ability to gently steer our cosmic neighborhood and ensure Earth's safety for generations to come. The ability to deflect an asteroid is a promise for our future, but to secure it we must first return to our past. For the first time in half a century, a rocket built for human deep space travel stood on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. It was November 16, 2022, and the vehicle was Artemis 1, the inaugural flight of NASA's, a most powerful rocket ever constructed, the Space Launch System. Towering over the Florida coastline at 322 feet, this orange and white behemoth represented a new architecture for exploration, a colossal booster stage, and two solid rocket motors generating over 8.8 million pounds of thrust. Its payload was the Orion spacecraft, a sleek, conical capsule designed to carry astronauts farther from Earth than any human-rated vehicle had ever gone. But for this first mission, the crew seats were occupied by mannequins equipped with sensors, named Commander Munikin Campos and others, their purpose to measure the radiation and forces future astronauts would endure. The launch itself was a spectacle of raw power, a rolling thunder that shook the ground as the SLS clawed its way into the sky, a visible declaration that the moon was back on the agenda. Orion's 25-day journey was a meticulously planned stress test. After separating from the rocket's upper stage, it performed a translunar injection burn and sailed toward the moon. But it did not enter a simple orbit. Instead, it flew a distant retrograde orbit, a wide, stable loop that took it over 40,000 miles beyond the far side of the moon, a point over 270,000 miles from Earth. This was the farthest any spacecraft built for humans had ever traveled. From that vast distance, Orion's cameras sent back images that stole the breath of everyone watching. There was the moon itself, a stark, cratered globe, but the true showstopper was the view looking back. The spacecraft captured a poignant sequence, a crescent Earth setting behind the curved limb of the moon, a silent, blue marble dwarfed by the lunar desolation. It was an Earthrise for a new generation, a visceral reminder of the loneliness and beauty of deep space. The mission was filled with technical triumphs and tense moments. Engineers held their breath as Orion's vital heat shield, the largest ever built, endured a searing re-entry at 25,000 miles per hour, temperatures reaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, a successful final exam for the system that must protect crews returning from lunar speeds. When the capsule splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean on December 11th, the data began to tell a story of overwhelming success. Every primary objective was met. The rocket performed flawlessly, the capsule's systems operated with precision, and the heat shield proved its worth. Artemis 1 was not a landing, but it was the essential first step. It proved the foundational hardware worked, de-risking the path for Artemis 2, which will carry a crew of 4 around the moon, and Artemis 3, which aims to return boots to the lunar surface, this time to stay. This mission reignited the lunar dream not as a nostalgic rerun, but as a sustainable campaign. The goal is no longer to just plant a flag and leave, but to learn how to live and work on another world, using the moon as a proving ground for the technologies and endurance needed for the ultimate destination, Mars. Artemis 1 proved we could go back, but our next mission brought a piece of the solar system's birth back to us. While new rockets aimed for the moon, a small probe named OSIRIS-REx was completing a 7-year, 4 billion-mile round trip to an asteroid called Bennu. This was not a flyby or an impact, but a cosmic heist, an attempt to steal pristine material from a time capsule orbiting the Sun. The asteroid Bennu is a cosmic rubble pile, a mountain of dark rock and gravel barely held together by its own minuscule gravity, a relic from the very dawn of our solar system over 4.5 billion years ago. The spacecraft arrived in 2018 and spent 2 years in a delicate dance with the asteroid, mapping its treacherous surface in exquisite detail. What it found was a shock. Scientists had expected a relatively smooth beach of fine regolith. Instead, OSIRIS-REx revealed a world littered with car-sized boulders, a jagged, chaotic landscape that looked utterly impossible to land on. The sample collection maneuver, dubbed TAG for touch and go, had to be completely replanned. The team identified one relatively clear spot, nicknamed Nightingale, a target the size of a few parking spaces surrounded by rocky hazards. On October 20, 2020, the probe began its slow, 4-hour descent. With no real-time control from Earth due to the 18-minute communication delay, it relied entirely on its autonomous navigation system. It compared real-time images to its onboard map, steering itself toward the tiny safe zone. As it touched down, its sampling arm punched into the surface, and a burst of nitrogen gas stirred up a storm of rocks and dust, which were captured in a collection head. The maneuver was so successful it almost became a failure. The arm sank deeper than expected, and the collector head swallowed so much material that its lid was jammed open by larger rocks, allowing precious asteroid particles to slowly leak out into space. The team had to cancel planned instrument measurements and rush to stow the sample, watching anxiously as particles drifted away. But the majority of the treasure was secured. 3 years later, on September 24, 2023, the mission's return capsule, no larger than a truck tire, screamed into Earth's atmosphere over the California coast. It was a man-made meteor, enduring a plasma inferno to protect its precious cargo. Parachutes deployed, and it made a gentle, dusty landing at the Utah Test and Training Range, right on target. The capsule was whisked away to a pristine clean room at NASA Johnson Space Center, where scientists in protective suits began the meticulous process of disassembly. Inside, they found black dust and pebbles coating every surface of the sample collection mechanism, far more than the mission's goal of 60 grams. This was the most pristine sample of an asteroid ever returned, material untouched by Earth's environment, holding chemical secrets locked away since before the planets formed. Early analysis has already revealed a bounty. The samples are rich in carbon and water-bearing clay minerals. This is the smoking gun, direct evidence that asteroids like Bennu could have been the delivery trucks for the essential ingredients of life, seeding a young Earth with the water for its oceans and the organic compounds for its biology. By holding this ancient rubble in our hands, we are not just studying a rock. We are reading the original recipe for our world, and perhaps for life itself. The ancient rubble of Bennu held our past, but a new set of tracks now pointed to our future on a world we thought we knew. In the summer of 2023, a robotic explorer from a nation not traditionally seen as a space superpower aimed for a spot no machine or human had ever reached. India's Chandrayaan-3 mission set its sights on the Moon's south pole, a region of profound darkness and tantalizing promise. This was not a simple landing. It was a high-stakes bid for a cosmic treasure hidden in eternal shadow. The lunar South Pole is a jagged, chaotic landscape, pockmarked with deep craters whose floors never see sunlight. Temperatures there can plunge to -400 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to trap volatile compounds like water ice for billions of years. For any hope of establishing a sustained human presence on the Moon, that ice is the ultimate prize, a potential source of drinking water, breathable oxygen, and rocket fuel. But landing there is a navigational nightmare, requiring a spacecraft to autonomously avoid boulders and steep slopes in a poorly mapped terrain. After a Chandrayaan-2 landing attempt failed in 2019, the Indian Space Research Organization went back to the drawing board. Chandrayaan-3 was engineered for resilience, with stronger legs, improved software, and a relentless focus on simplicity and redundancy. The world watched on August 23 as the Vikram lander began its powered descent. The final minutes were a silent, breathless vigil, with the mission control team in Bengaluru monitoring data with intense focus. Then, the confirmation arrived. Vikram had achieved a soft, precise touchdown. India had not only landed on the moon, it had become the first country to land at the southern polar region. The celebration across the nation was electric, a moment of immense national pride that resonated across the global south, proving that deep space exploration was no longer the exclusive domain of a few historical powers. Shortly after, the lander's ramp deployed, and the small, six-wheeled Pragyan rover rolled onto the dusty regolith. Over the next 2 weeks, as the lunar day allowed, Pragyan trundled across the surface, its instruments analyzing the soil composition. While the rover's direct measurements were limited by its short operational life, the mission's orbital component and the landing data provided compelling evidence. The sensors strongly indicated the presence of sulfur and, critically, confirmed the existence of water ice in the permanently shadowed regions around the landing site. This was the confirmation scientists had long hoped for. Chandrayaan-3 did more than plant a flag. It effectively took a core sample of the moon's future. By proving the water ice is there and accessible, it transformed the lunar South Pole from a scientific curiosity into a strategic destination. That ice is the cornerstone for everything that comes next. A local resource that could sustain astronauts and refuel interplanetary ships headed to Mars and beyond. In one precise touchdown, India cemented its status as a premier spacefaring nation and fundamentally altered the economic and practical roadmap for humanity's return to the moon. The race was no longer just about getting there, but about who could best learn to live off this new, frozen land. The lunar South Pole offers a new frontier, but the very concept of a frontier is about to change forever. For over 2 decades, the International Space Station has been humanity's solitary outpost, a symbol of global cooperation and a priceless laboratory floating 250 miles overhead. Yet its story has a planned ending. Sometime around 2030, the venerable station will be deorbited, plunging into a remote part of the Pacific Ocean. This is not an ending, but a handoff. The torch of a permanent human presence in space is passing from governments to commerce, marking the rise of private space stations. This is the event that will transform low Earth orbit from a destination into a marketplace, a neighborhood open for business. The first steps are already being taken. Axiom Space is building commercial modules that will initially attach directly to the International Space Station, creating the world's first private wing in space. Astronauts will live and work there, conducting proprietary research for companies and hosting private citizens. Then, when the International Space Station is retired, these Axiom modules will detach and become a free-flying, independent commercial station, a seamless transition from public to private ownership. But they will not be alone. Voyager Space, in partnership with Airbus, is developing Starlab, a single module station designed to be more efficient and nimble, focusing squarely on serving a global customer base of researchers and nations without their own space programs. Perhaps the most ambitious vision comes from Blue Origin and Sierra Space, with their concept called Orbital Reef. They envision a mixed-use business park in space, a bustling hub with multiple docking ports, open architecture for various companies to install their own labs or habitats, and even dedicated zones for space tourism and media production. The business model represents a fundamental shift. For 50 years, access to orbit was a government contract, a privilege granted to a select few astronauts and carefully vetted experiments. These new stations operate on a different principle. They are real estate developers and landlords in microgravity. Their customers will not be space agencies alone, but pharmaceutical companies seeking to grow perfect protein crystals for new drugs, manufacturers wanting to create ultra-pure fiber optics in vacuum, film studios producing immersive entertainment, and yes, tourists who can book a stay in a space hotel. This is the democratization of the ultimate high ground. The cost, while still immense, will be driven by competition and commercial efficiency, not monolithic government budgets. It means a university in Norway or a startup in Singapore could, for a price, run their own experiment in orbit for weeks. It means artists and journalists could become regular visitors, telling new stories from a new perspective. The International Space Station proved we could live and work in space. These private outposts will prove we can thrive there, building an economy among the stars. The era of space as an exclusive government preserve is closing. The era of space as a domain for all humanity, for commerce, for culture, and for countless new dreams is just beginning to dawn. But those private outposts will be listening posts too. Their quiet vantage point perfect for scanning the cosmic static for a signal that is not random at all. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has entered a new and radically expanded phase, moving beyond simply listening for radio greetings. Today, the hunt is for technosignatures, the detectable signs of advanced technology that an alien civilization might leave as a fingerprint on the cosmos. This is not about finding a deliberate message. It is about finding the unavoidable evidence of a society's industrial footprint, a search for the smoke, not the campfire. Projects like Breakthrough Listen, funded by private donors, are turning some of the world's most powerful radio telescopes into relentless eavesdroppers, scanning millions of stars across billions of radio channels, sifting the noise for a pattern that whispers artificial. Yet the search has grown even more sophisticated. Astronomers now scour data from telescopes like Kepler, which stared at stars to find planets for a different kind of anomaly. They look for stars that dim in bizarre, irregular ways no natural phenomenon can easily explain. Could that strange flickering be the shadow of a Dyson swarm? A vast constellation of energy collecting satellites built by a civilization so advanced it has enveloped its sun to harness its total power output. They analyze the chemical composition of exoplanet atmospheres, not just for oxygen, but for industrial pollutants like chlorofluorocarbons that would have no natural source. They even look for the faint heat signature of city lights on the night side of a distant world. This is a forensic investigation of the galaxy, searching for the broken tools and waste heat of a civilization we may never meet. The philosophical weight of this search is immense. For all of human history, the question, "Are we alone?" has been a matter of faith or speculation. The discovery of a single, unambiguous technosignature would end that debate in an instant. It would be the most profound discovery in history, a cosmic mirror showing us that intelligence, technology, and perhaps even ambition are not flukes unique to our pale blue dot. It would rewrite our place in the universe, transforming humanity from a lonely storyteller in the dark into a member of a vast, ancient community we are only just beginning to perceive. The silence so far is not a verdict, but an invitation to look harder, to think more creatively. We are no longer just calling out into the void hoping for an answer. We are learning to read the void itself, searching for the signature of a hand that once built something magnificent among the stars. That search for other intelligences asks who else might be out there. But our own intelligence is already charting a course for the most audacious journey in our species' history. The red planet, Mars, is no longer a destination for robotic rovers alone. It is the finish line for the next great leap, a human mission that stands as the single most complex and consequential undertaking we have ever imagined. This is not a vague someday dream. Concrete plans are being drafted in engineering labs and mission control centers, with two primary paths leading toward the same crimson horizon. NASA's approach is a methodical stepping stone, using the upcoming Artemis lunar missions as a vital proving ground. The goal is to learn how to live and work on another world, testing advanced life support systems, habitats, and the use of local resources, all within a 3-day commute from Earth. Mastery on the Moon is the essential rehearsal for the 3-year round trip to Mars. In parallel, SpaceX is developing its fully reusable Starship system, a spacecraft as tall as a skyscraper, designed to carry 100 people or massive amounts of cargo on interplanetary voyages. Its vision is one of scale and frequency, aiming to make Martian travel not a rare flags and footprints event, but the beginning of a sustained city. The hurdles between these blueprints and reality are staggering. First is the relentless threat of radiation. Once outside Earth's protective magnetic field, astronauts would be bombarded by cosmic rays and solar flares, a silent storm that increases cancer risk and could damage the central nervous system. Shielding requires mass, and mass is the enemy of rocketry. Solutions might involve innovative materials, water-filled walls, or even creating artificial magnetic fields around the spacecraft. Then comes the sheer difficulty of keeping people alive. A mission lasting up to 900 days requires a completely closed-loop life support system that recycles every drop of water and every molecule of oxygen with near-perfect efficiency. A single component failure could be fatal. The psychological challenge is equally daunting. A crew of 4 to 6 individuals would be confined in a can for years, with a 20-minute communication delay to Earth, watching their home world shrink to a pale blue star. The isolation, the monotony, and the inescapable closeness would test human endurance in ways we have only begun to study in Antarctic stations or on the International Space Station. Perhaps the most critical key to success lies in the Martian soil itself. In situ resource utilization, or ISRU, is the make or break technology. It means using what is already on Mars to survive. This includes extracting water ice from the regolith to drink, splitting it into oxygen to breathe and hydrogen for fuel, and using the Martian atmosphere, rich in carbon dioxide, to manufacture methane rocket propellant. If we cannot live off the land, the mission becomes impossibly heavy and expensive. This mission will be the ultimate test of our biology, our technology, and our collective will. It will demand international cooperation on a scale that makes the International Space Station look simple. When the first human footprints are pressed into the rusty Martian dust, the event will resonate through history with a force equal to the Apollo landings. It will redefine humanity not as a species of one world, but as a multi-planetary civilization. The first child born on Mars will look up at a sky with 2 moons and a distant, bright blue evening star called Earth. A reminder of the lonely ocean we crossed to ensure that, no matter what happens on our first home, a part of us endures among the stars. From a single, anxious beep to the silent footprints on another world, this journey through 30 events is not merely a chronicle of rockets and planets. It is the story of how the cosmos reached down and rewrote the human story. Each beep, each launch, each tragedy and triumph was a pivot point, a moment where history itself was nudged onto a new trajectory. These events spurred a technological revolution that gave us satellite television, global positioning, and the miniaturized computers in our pockets. They forged both fierce rivalry and profound partnership, uniting nations in orbit even as they divided them in ideology on the ground. They expanded our scientific knowledge from the composition of moon rocks to the birth cries of the universe, and in doing so, they gave us the ultimate perspective, the humbling and beautiful view of our own fragile world floating in the dark. Most of all, they changed how we see ourselves, transforming humanity from earthbound inhabitants to cosmic voyagers, a species with 1 foot on the pale blue dot and an eye on the stars. This legacy is not locked in history books. It is alive in every new rocket test, every image from a distant telescope, every plan for a lunar base. The next chapter is being written right now. So stay curious, support the science and the stories that push us forward, and tonight or any night, take a moment to look up. Trace the path of a satellite with your finger, find a planet glowing steadily in the twilight, and remember, the next event that changes history forever is always on the horizon. Which of these 30 moments do you think reshaped our world the most? Let us know in the comments, and if this journey through the stars resonated with you, subscribe to keep exploring